Today on Flaming Armor-Piercing Elven Bows, Starfire Shafts. So we talked about Sisters of Avalorn yesterday. They were looking at their Wood Elven cousins, the Glade Guards with Starfire Shafts. Fire Armor-Piercing Bows once again. This time no magic damage though. There was a point long ago in the past where they did, but that is no longer the case. 16 Armor-Piercing Missile Damage, 2 base. If you remember from our discussion about Sisters, this is lower than Sisters and Handgunners, but obviously faster reload rate than handgunners, I believe. We'll look at that again after the fact. But here, Wood Elves versus High Elves. This is from the Warhammer World Championship, Consul of Rome versus Bob. And Consul here going with High Elves. Let's take a look at these builds here real quick. Fun stuff overall. We've got Gilgallion on foot. So the Dreadlord Sword and Shield is Nolosi. This right here is Gilgallion. The Prince Sword and Shield on foot. Very, very cheap. That's allowed Consul of Rome to go super wide here. He's got Shadow Warriors, he's got Spearmen, he's got probably Silverin Guard mixed in here, maybe, perhaps Lothern Sea Guard. No, it looks like mostly just Spearmen. Rangers, Reavers, full stack of High Elves, which is not something you see every day. On the flip side, we've got a Spell Weaver here, a High Spell Weaver, just been token in the forest. You know, all the green. We've got Wild Riders with shields. Blade Riders with spears, tons of Dryads in some kind of a dread formation here. Just a line back, and then of course all the Starfire Shafts, Azrai Spears. Just full stack of Elf versus full stack of Elf, which is something I love to see. You know, Elves murdering each other like this. So nice charge in the front line by the Silver Helms, doing some solid damage to the Dryads. But already you can see that the Starfire Shafts focusing on the Lothern Sea Guard, even though they do have shields. The focus fire here from the Glade Guards, just these three, is pretty real. And now the Starfire Shafts can potentially be risky. Nice side-shotting Soul Quench there, just tears apart this unit of Spearmen, where another Burning Head rather, on the flip side, just roasts a couple of Dryads. So some nice spell usage back and forth. But, yeah, in regards to the Starfire Shafts, it's an interesting one against High Elves. High Elves of any faction have the most units with fire resistance, and that's still not that many units at the end of the day. Really like Dragon Princes and the Phoenixes are the only ones I can think of. Maybe like Imric, a few other characters, but the Starfire Shafts here just doing a number on these Silver Helms. You know, whatever other targets they can shoot at, they just get in range and focus fire. And the nice thing is, Glade Guards, they're generally, as, you know, kind of a unit overall. I will be talking about the other variants in detail in other videos, but just kind of as a general rule, they're decent-ish melee stats. I mean, 26 weapon strength, not too bad. 27 weapon strength, also not too bad. They are relatively expensive in terms of archers, but at the same time, their accuracy and fire rate is among the best. They can have all the benefits of being Wood Elves, in terms of, like, hiding in the woods, firing from the edge of woods, especially. Quite advantageous to them, and they have all the variations as well, of course. And yeah, I mean, just overall, the accuracy and the fire rate is very good for archers, and the damage as well we can look at, quite cost effective. But oh, nice Burning Head from the High Elves. Not overcast, looks like didn't do too much damage, but it does a solid amount of damage to both units. This other one kind of running into the area of effect. Tough play there. But yeah, right now, in the back line here, we've got these Glade Riders trying to get at those Bolt Throwers. Bolt Throwers just slinging bolts, obviously, at the Wild Riders with shields there, doing some nice damage. Those Glade Riders almost make it through, but eventually get routed off just by units kind of surrounding them, because their leadership was so low to begin with. But getting home against the Shadow Warriors over there, the Glade Guards are managing to stay protected, kind of getting the support of Azrai Spears against Spearmen. Oh man, this is a bad day for this unit of High Elf Spearmen. Azrai Spears, Glade Guards, and a nice little surround here. Oh yeah. And in terms of, like, armor-piercing missiles, you know, there's quite a few in that 600 cost range. You know, you've got your Empire handgunners. You've got kind of 650 for like Starfire Shafts, I believe, and you know, like what is it, Dark Shards as well, like 600, 650 for the shielded variant. So Dwarven Thunders are 700s. There's quite a few of these armor-piercing missile units right in this cost bracket. Blade Guards are definitely one of them. um, yeah, and the fact that you can bring just so many of them, they tend to be fairly cost-effective overall. But the battle at this point still very close. 5 minutes of slugging back and forth. We've got Apotheosis on these Wild Riders as they swing up and into the back line. Initially, kind of clean engagements clashing, but the Elven Light Cavalry has definitely proved... I should say Wood Elven Light Cavalry has proved to come out on top, you know, with the Starfire Shafts kind of helping to beat the Silverhelms in some key engagements there, and as a result, the Wood Elves having more or less free reign in the mobility engagement. These Wild Riders can sweep up and around, finally shut down this Bolt Thrower here, chase off some of these routing archers, even potentially chase off this Mage as well. A nice Soul Quench just blowing up that Spearman right there. But Consul's still holding. Lines are still holding. These Lothern Seaguard will be great at shooting and then bracing. Oh, just a pitiful uphill charge. Very limp from those Glade Riders. They send a few models flying, but charging uphill is a little bit rough in general. So you see those Wild Riders, same thing, just wet noodle into the front of those Lothern Seaguards. That's a really nice situation for those Lothern Seaguard in particular. But this presence of Starfire Shafts used up most of their ammunition, but now can move into combat in the late game. They have, again, relatively decent stats for skirmishers. They are still elves after all, so they can potentially move in here on some rear charges and finish off some spearmen, some tattered spearmen, and some other things like that. These Azrai Spears holding out on the flank here eventually. The rest of their forces do get broken. Those Lothern Seaguard had a really nice stand right there on that uphill kind of, defense. Wild Riders, though, coming to break this pocket. Both players kind of forming up their last positions, although certainly the Wood Elves having a much greater presence here. These Starfire Shafts, still 58 models, 78 kills. Yeah, we've got 57 kills here. Only 19 for this unit, but still very solid performance overall. Used up all their ammunition, so you would hope they pay for themselves. They definitely do. Didn't have too many high-value armored targets to shoot at, but thankfully didn't have any, you know, fire resistance targets as well. Could have potentially been bad if he had brought, like, some Dragon Princes here from Consul Rome's side, and I would say I personally really like Dragon Princes in this matchup. Occasionally you might come up against Stag Knights, which is rough, but they can trade okay into Stag Knights if they get the right engagement. And yeah, in general, I mean, it's a small thing, but it does kind of negate the Starfire Shafts to a degree. But at this point, we'll go ahead and fast forward. Lothern Seaguard going to try and use up the rest of their ammunition as the Starfire Shafts do as well. Just chasing some routing units off over here, making sure those Rangers don't come back. Spellweaver gets in here with the Azrai Spears. Lothern Seaguard do actually have a pretty solid amount of ammo, and those Azrai Spears do get routed, so going to be up to the Glade Guards. This unit of Azrai Spears also, they're trying to not take too much missile damage there, pop their missile resistance buff. And, I mean, they're not like they could take a lot. There's just a handful of Lothern Seaguard here, and they're actually shooting those Wild Riders who managed to mostly dodge. Let's continue to fast forward here as Azrai Spearmen move in. Blade Guards move in as well. Not necessarily a rear charge, but hey, they're here. Plenty of ranks of them to fight. Grind through what's left of the Spearmen. Wild Riders getting a nice charge in here. Lorax Blessing on them. Give them some stock and Unspottable, a little bit of extra speed. They're very tired though. You can still see even still those kind of uphill charges don't really do much in terms of impact. But the Fear certainly does something in terms of leadership impact, and there's the game. So a very, very close game. Oh, honestly, super well played to both. Those Wild Riders, again, the decisive factor for me, in my mind, of the battle came down to the Starfire Shafts helping to even out the cavalry fight, or even just beating decisively the Silverhelms initially. Like both of these units of Silverhelms, you can see, just really didn't pan out. And this one in particular got shredded by arrows and then immediately chased off. So really rough there for those Silverhelms. And then that allowed these Wild Riders and the Glade Riders to then come through and mop up in the late game. This one in particular, almost 3,000 damage value, like 300 kills. Against High Elves, 300 kills is an impressive number to get to. So those Wild Riders, man, that was enabled primarily by, I mean, obviously Bob microing them well, but also by the Starfire shafts and the Azrai spears kind of taking out the Silver Helms, since they're the biggest threat head-to-head for the Wild Riders. That armor and charge, the Wild Riders don't necessarily trade great into the Silver Helms, but Lothar and Seaguard do contribute. I'm planning a video about them soon. There was one Silverin Guard. Okay, so there was one Silverin Guard there. Did an okay job. The Rangers, one of them actually trades pretty decently, but I don't fully love Rangers here. They don't... I mean, the Dryad's kind of a weird trade because Dryads have magic damage, so I don't know about that. But Gilgallion survives. I mean, that's the point. You take him because he's cheap and he's relatively tanky in terms of melee defense. Has very low HP, but did survive. But yeah, honestly, very, very fun game. Thanks to Consul rather, for sending that one in. But in terms of Glade Guards, talked about a few other units that are kind of in this like 600 to 700 cost armor-piercing missiles, right? So we've got Glade Guards with Starfire shafts coming in 650, Empire handgunners at 600, right? We've got Dark Elves with their silly Dark Shards, also 600, but can take, or 550 rather, 650 for the shields. And you've got Dwarfs all the way up at 700. I've talked about Thunderers before. I still think Thunderers are the best unit of, like, these four, kind of comparing them. Given that the range, only 145 is lower, certainly, than Starfire shafts, but they have armor and shields, which does matter for quite a bit. And their melee stats are also, in terms of attack and defense, very comparable, actually, to Starfire shafts. So they also have the magic resistance, better leadership. Well, yeah, better leadership just slightly. A little bit more HP as well. That's why I would kind of put them above. But in terms of damage output, they're actually exactly the same DPS over 10 seconds. On paper, 17.5 base. Whereas this is, yeah, 16 and 2, so lower missile damage overall, but a faster reload rate. And we find that's probably the same with handgunners. Yep, same damage over 10 seconds, but as with the Thunderers, right, damage output is mitigated by the fact that Starfire shafts have a faster reload rate. And then with Dark Shards actually have higher DPS, considerably lower range, and just lower everything than the Starfire shafts, right? We compare them to the shielded variant that's actually the same cost. I mean, the silver shield is significant in a skirmish fight, don't get me wrong. 55% missile block chance is pretty considerable, but the kind of longer range of the Starfire shafts means they can be shooting the Dark Shards before they even get into range, and that's true of, you know, most skirmishers. Slightly lower missile damage. The double shot of the Dark Shards does kind of give them more DPS on paper, but at the same time, it also leads to them being... They're still pretty accurate, but they can also do horrendous friendly fire damage, more so than any of the other of these four units. So it's an interesting one. I would say Glade Guards for me are probably number 2, just after Thunderers. Like, the long range and arc of fire and the faster reload rate, in my mind, gives them an advantage over handgunners. You know, they have the Woodsman trait. They can actually fire on the move while advancing as well. Decent-ish stats. Like, definitely you consider their melee stats in comparison to handgunners much, much better, right? 10 more melee defenses is pretty good. So, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on... I'm sure I'll be talking more about Glade Guards in general, but specifically about Starfire shafts for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.